the island and the landscape of the island is a big part of my attraction to landscape painting, which was my first love of painting. And now I primarily paint in still life, but landscape was my first love. And so whenever I get out to the island, I take my little paint box and take stolen moments to make little paintings. I grew up in Massachusetts, but coming to Block Island every summer of my childhood. So these paintings that I did for this show are also very small, especially relative to the other artists' work, because they were done during little moments that I had. I have two small children. So essentially during their nap times, I was able to go out and find a spot that I had maybe noticed while driving around the island and hurried back to with my paint box. But I always make the same mistakes. Like when I'm driving around, I always think I need to look for something sort of complex in terms of composition. And then I get out there and not only am I working on a tiny scale, but the world is just so infinite once you start looking. And so I'm always thinking I need to find something complicated. And then it's the simpler things like just looking out at Scotch Beach straight dead on into the waves that, like Tom's work, there's just so much to be found there that you're never going to feel that you got nearly what you were looking at. So that's always the mistake I make, is thinking I need to find something that has many elements. And then probably the more successful sessions are when I just stick to something super simple. In theory, I was trained in old master techniques with oil painting. And so, those rules are very familiar to me, but I don't think I'm definitely operating on intuition. And so I was looking at the paintings, and probably the buoy that I put in Scotch Beach might be on a third. And I think the Sullivan House might be on the third in the painting that I did from Dunn's Bridge. But these things are sort of just ingrained at this point, and I'm more thinking there's just so much to balance when you're outside painting from life. There's there's the changing light, there's the elements, there's the infinite complexity of what you're looking at, and you're editing, and you're trying to balance, and you're trying to create composition, and you're trying to get that palette. And the watercolor changes so much on Block Island with the light through the day. You get bugs in your paintings, which a couple of these paintings have like little bug prints in them, and sand, and it's all part of the experience. And so, actually obeying the rules of painting might come last. I think there's just such a balancing act going on in that hour and a half or whatever it is that I've found to paint. So, but that also might be my temperament. I resist things like grids. With my studio work, I actually compose as I'm painting. So this painting is, I don't know if you can even see it, but this still life that I'm working on now, it only has a few elements, and I'll keep adding things. I'm not the kind of painter where I set up the whole painting and I know what it's going to look like and then I paint it. I'm more improvising as I go and designing as I go. So it doesn't always work, but I think maybe it comes actually from being a landscape painter first, because you have to stay open when you're a landscape painter, and you have to edit, and you cannot be true to anything that you're really seeing. So I think I'm trying to do that. I'm trying to have that experience in the studio when I'm doing these improvisational still lives.
The show is Land and Sea, and it's focusing on three of Jesse's gallery artists. And I am the land portion of the Land and Sea. The three pieces, they all kind of relate to each other. One thing that I do in general with a lot of my paintings is I set the horizon line either low or high to create a tension and a pleasing composition in the painting. So in these three paintings, they're all very kind of simple, serene paintings, and the horizon line is set low. So the top half of the painting is sky, vast sky, and the bottom portion of all three paintings is land. One's a salt marsh, one is a beachscape, more or less, and then the other is a field. So it's three different ways of showing a landscape. What's in common with all three of them, and what I really try to do, is to create, especially in the time that we're in right now, but in general, my paintings are this way, is a sense of peace and serenity too. And I think all of them have that sense. Even before COVID too, I like kind of expressing that sense of solitude, and maybe not necessarily before COVID, not necessarily isolation, but that serene sense of just having one element on a hill. And sometimes in my paintings, it will be just a tree or a couple of trees too, just kind of positioned on one side of the canvas, on the left side or the right side of the canvas. And that just seems to be thematic and what speaks to me. Also, another thing that I didn't really talk about too, which especially in these times, is the healing sense of nature too. And I've found myself taking a lot more walks and being outside a lot, and being able to paint outside too is a wonderful thing. And you really do physically feel that sense that no matter what's going on in the world, nature, it's always going to be the same. The sun's always going to shine. There's always going to be a rainstorm. We're going to have hurricanes and tornadoes. I mean, that's another issue altogether. But the weather and nature is always there. I mean, this is not changing any of that. And there's something wonderful about being able to be in it. And for me as a painter, being able to create something that a buyer or a collector can bring into their home, and also have that sense. I mean, for me, that's very important to be able to communicate that.
Well, my approach to my work usually is not really planned, or I don't, not always. Like the foggy morning that's in the show, I had a vision of that before I even started, and that was, I knew where I was going with it. And that was, for that one, but usually I'll go, and it's all about layering and mark making and more layering, and until the painting speaks to me. And not always, but it happens often, yeah. I love the feel of it. And this wax really brings out the color. It enhances the color. The blue will become brighter blue, and whites are whiter, and it just has a great feel under my palette knife and brush. And I've had a lot of luck with it. So, a friend of mine introduced me to it a few years back, and I had never worked with it, and began playing around with it, and I fell in love with the process, and it's really, I'm hooked on it. My pieces, to me, they're not abstract. I think they're suggestive. Like you look at them, you know it's a landscape, a seascape, but it's not traditional. And I honestly, some of them look, I think that a lot of them resemble one another. That's how I work.